The dog appeared exactly 3 minutes before the man in the snow stopped breathing. Not barking, not running, just standing motionless in the middle of Route 83 with blood frozen across her chest and a leather collar hanging half-torn from her neck. Every instinct told Ethan Cole to keep driving. At 2:13 in the morning, in the mountains outside Missoula, Montana, nothing good waited on an empty highway during a snowstorm. But the strangest part was not the dog. It was what she did next. The German Shepherd walked directly to his truck, then grabbed the sleeve of his jacket in her teeth and pulled. Hard. Like she already knew time was running out for someone else. Before we begin, tell me where are watching from. Drop your country in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story travels. Snow hammered the windshield in thick, wet sheets as Ethan killed the engine and stepped into the freezing dark. The cold hit him instantly, sharp enough to sting his lungs. His boots sank 6 inches into fresh powder while the wind dragged pine needles across the road like whispers. The shepherd backed away from him slowly, watching, waiting. Her coat was sable beneath the blood and ice, beautiful once, but ruined now by scars along her ribs and a patch of missing fur around her neck where the collar had rubbed raw against skin. Ethan crouched slightly, palms open. Easy, girl. His voice came out rough from disuse. The dog did not growl, did not wag her tail either. She just turned toward the forest and looked back at him again, then disappeared into the trees. Ethan exhaled sharply. Damn it, he should have left. Any sane man would have. He had driven these roads enough to know stories like this usually ended with a rescue team recovering frozen bodies after sunrise. But then he saw it. Paw prints. Fresh. And beside them, streaks in the snow. Someone had been dragged. The shepherd barked once somewhere deeper in the woods. Short. Urgent. Ethan grabbed the flashlight from his truck and followed. Branches clawed at his coat as he pushed through dense pine. Snow muffled everything except the crunch beneath his boots and the distant howl of wind moving through the mountains. 30 yards in, he nearly lost the trail. 50 yards later, he found blood on a broken branch. Human blood. The dog appeared again ahead of him between the trees, ghost-like in the storm. Waiting, then moving, always just far enough ahead to keep him following. Ethan's chest tightened. Marines learned to trust instinct before logic. And something about this animal felt wrong in a way he could not explain. Not dangerous. Desperate. He crossed a shallow ravine, boots slipping against buried rock, and suddenly the shepherd stopped beside a fallen cedar. Ethan swept the flashlight downward. A man lay half buried beneath snow and broken branches near the edge of a ravine. Late 50s. Heavy winter coat. Beard frozen white with ice. One leg twisted unnaturally beneath him. His skin had already turned pale blue. Ethan dropped instantly beside him. Hey, sir, can you hear me? Nothing. The shepherd pressed herself against the unconscious man's side, shielding him from the wind with her own body. Ethan froze for half a second when he realized what he was seeing. She had been laying there with him, possibly for hours, keeping him warm. Jesus. Ethan checked for a pulse. Weak. Barely there. The kind that disappeared fast in temperatures this low. He pulled his radio phone from his jacket, but the screen flashed no signal. Of course. Snowstorm. Mountain dead zone. The shepherd began pacing suddenly, whining low in her throat. Not panic. Warning. Ethan looked up. The sound reached him a second later. Ice cracking somewhere above the ravine. He lifted the flashlight toward the ridge just as snow broke loose from the rocks overhead. Move. Ethan threw himself sideways, grabbing the unconscious man by the shoulders while a wave of snow and shattered ice crashed down where they had been seconds earlier. The shepherd lunged clear just in time. For a moment, everything vanished white. Ethan coughed hard, snow filling his mouth and collar. The unconscious man groaned faintly beneath him. Alive. Still alive. The dog emerged from the swirling snow again, breathing hard now. Amber eyes locked directly on Ethan's face. That was when he noticed the collar clearly for the first time. Old brown leather, cracked from weather, and stitched crudely into the inside lining were words. Ethan brushed snow away with shaking fingers. Return her, or they die. The wind howled through the trees. The shepherd immediately stepped backward the moment he touched the collar. Not aggressive, terrified. Then somewhere deeper in the forest beyond them, another sound echoed through the storm. A truck door slamming. Ethan killed his flashlight instantly. The forest swallowed them whole. Only the storm remained, wind scraping through pine branches and snow hissing across the ravine like static from a broken radio. Somewhere beyond the trees, another truck door slammed shut. Then came voices. Low. Male. Too far away to understand, but close enough to tighten every muscle in Ethan's body. The shepherd pressed herself flat against the unconscious man, ears pinned hard against her skull. Fear. Real fear. Not the nervousness of a stray. The kind that remembered people. Ethan crouched lower beside them and studied the slope above. Fresh tire tracks meant somebody else had reached this road recently despite the storm. Nobody came this deep into the mountains after midnight unless they already knew where they were going. The older man groaned weakly beneath him. Ethan leaned close. Sir, can you hear me? The man's eyelids fluttered halfway open. Snow clung to his lashes. Dog, he whispered painfully. Protect the dog. Then his body went limp again. Ethan stared at him. Not help me. Not call the police. Protect the dog. Another light flickered faintly through the trees uphill. Flashlights. Moving closer. Ethan made a decision instantly. He slid his arms beneath the injured man and lifted with a strained breath. The man weighed at least 200 pounds with soaked winter gear. Pain shot through Ethan's shoulder from an old combat injury, but adrenaline buried most of it. Come on, he muttered. Move. The shepherd darted ahead silently through the trees as if she already knew where to go. Ethan followed her downhill through deep snow, boots slipping against hidden rock. The wind intensified, carrying the scent of gasoline somewhere nearby. Then he saw it. Hey, ranger station. Abandoned. Half buried beneath snowdrifts at the bottom of the ravine. One wall leaned crooked from years of weather damage, but the roof still held. The shepherd disappeared through the broken doorway first. Ethan dragged the unconscious man inside seconds later and kicked the door shut behind them. Darkness wrapped around the cabin immediately. Cold. Damp wood. Rust. The smell of old smoke trapped in the walls. Ethan laid the man carefully near the fireplace and swept his flashlight around the room. Broken shelves. Rotting blankets. An overturned table. Then something strange caught his eye near the far wall. Dog bowls. 3 of them. Recently used. The water inside one was not frozen yet. Ethan slowly turned toward the shepherd. She stood perfectly still near the fireplace now, watching him with those amber eyes that never seemed to blink long enough. You brought him here before, Ethan whispered. The dog lowered her head slightly. Not submission. Recognition. Ethan moved quickly, rebuilding the old fireplace with dry wood from a stacked crate near the wall. Within minutes, weak flames crackled alive, casting long orange shadows across the station. The older man's breathing steadied slightly in the warmth. Outside, headlights swept briefly through the trees above the ravine. Searching. Ethan extinguished his flashlight immediately. The shepherd moved to the boarded window and released a low growl, so deep it barely sounded canine anymore. Ethan crouched beside her carefully and peered through a crack in the boards. A dark pickup truck rolled slowly along the ridge road above them. No markings. No snow chains. The driver stopped near the ravine edge. Another man stepped out holding a flashlight. Ethan's pulse slowed into something colder. Training. Observation before action. The man scanned the woods for several long seconds before turning back toward the truck. That was when Ethan noticed the symbol painted faintly near the rear bumper. A white triangle with a red slash through the center. The shepherd whimpered instantly at the sight of it and backed away from the window. Ethan frowned. You know them. The truck finally disappeared into the storm, but the silence afterward felt worse. Ethan exhaled slowly and turned back toward the fire. The older man's coat had shifted open during the rescue. Something metallic glinted beneath it. Ethan reached carefully into the inner pocket and pulled out a small silver key attached to a faded motel keychain. Room 214. Black Pine Lodge. Beneath the number was dried blood and a handwritten message barely visible in smeared ink. If she finds you first, do not trust the sheriff. Ethan stared at the words while the fire crackled softly between them. Then the shepherd suddenly lunged toward the back corner of the station. Not barking. Digging. Frantically. Dust and splintered wood flew across the floorboards as she clawed at the baseboards beneath an old cabinet. Ethan crossed the room cautiously and pulled the cabinet aside. Beneath it was a loose floor panel. The dog stepped back immediately, trembling now. Ethan knelt and pried the board loose with his knife. Underneath lay a plastic bag wrapped tightly in cloth to keep out moisture. Inside was a cell phone with a shattered screen. And beneath the phone, a little girl's pink winter glove. Ethan stared at the tiny pink glove resting beside the broken phone while the fire cracked softly behind him. It was small enough to fit a child no older than 6. Snowmelt dripped from the ceiling somewhere deeper inside the ranger station, each drop echoing through the silence like a ticking clock. The shepherd sat inches away now, trembling so hard her tags clicked faintly against the leather collar. Not aggression, not fear alone. Recognition. Ethan picked up the phone carefully. The screen was shattered nearly black, but when he pressed the side button, a weak light flickered alive for half a second before dying again. Battery almost gone. Come on, he muttered under his breath. He searched the room quickly until he found an old portable generator near the back wall covered beneath a tarp. Rusted, ancient, but maybe usable. Outside, the wind intensified, rattling the boarded windows hard enough to shake dust from the ceiling beams. The older man stirred suddenly near the fire. His breathing turned uneven. Ethan crossed the room immediately and checked his pulse again. Weakening. Hypothermia was winning. He needed a hospital within the next hour or this man would not survive until sunrise. But the roads above were crawling with whoever had followed the shepherd into the mountains. And the note had been clear. Do not trust the sheriff. Ethan looked toward the dog again. What exactly did you drag me into? The shepherd lowered her eyes. The old generator coughed alive on the third pole, filling the station with a low mechanical growl and the smell of gasoline. Ethan plugged the phone charger into the side outlet and waited. 10 seconds. 20. The cracked screen finally lit up faintly. 3% battery. No signal. One saved video file. No contacts. No name. The shepherd stood instantly the moment the screen brightened. Ears forward now, watching the phone instead of Ethan. He opened the video carefully. Static flickered across the screen first. Then a child appeared. A little girl wrapped in a purple winter coat, sitting inside what looked like the back seat of a truck. Her cheeks were tear-stained. One arm clung tightly around the shepherd's neck. The dog looked younger there. Healthier. If somebody finds Nova, the little girl whispered shakily into the camera, please do not let them send her back. Ethan froze. Nova. The child stroked the dog behind the ears with trembling fingers. They hurt the dogs here. Daddy said we were leaving tonight, but her voice broke apart suddenly as shouting erupted somewhere outside the truck. Male voices. Angry. The girl looked toward the window in panic. If we do not make it, the video cut to black. Ethan stared at the dead screen long after it ended. The room felt colder now despite the fire. The older man groaned again behind him, weaker this time. Ethan checked his watch. 3:07 a.m. The storm would only worsen before dawn. If he stayed, the man might die. If he left, whoever was hunting Nova could find the station first. Then another sound reached him. Soft at first, almost buried beneath the storm. Engines. Multiple. Ethan killed the generator instantly. Darkness swallowed the room again. Nova moved before he did, slipping silently toward the back hallway of the station. Ethan followed her with the flashlight beam low against the floorboards. At the end of the hallway was a steel emergency hatch half concealed beneath old shelves. The dog pawed at it urgently. Ethan pulled the hatch open. A narrow maintenance tunnel descended beneath the station into darkness. Cold air drifted upward carrying the scent of wet earth and pine roots. You knew this was here, Ethan whispered. Nova looked back toward the unconscious man near the fire, then back toward the tunnel. Another engine door slammed outside above them. Closer now. Flashlight beams swept briefly across cracks in the boarded windows. Ethan's pulse slowed again into that dangerous calm Marines carried into combat zones. He crouched beside the older man and searched his pockets quickly for identification. Wallet. Empty except for a photograph folded tightly inside. Ethan opened it beneath the flashlight beam. The little girl from the video smiled back at him beside the older man and Nova standing together in summer sunlight. Written across the bottom in faded blue ink were 4 words. Find her before Friday. Ethan looked up sharply. Friday was tomorrow. Ethan folded the photograph slowly while the storm groaned against the ranger station walls. Friday. Less than 24 hours away. Whatever that warning meant, somebody had believed it enough to hide evidence beneath the floorboards of an abandoned station in the middle of nowhere. Outside, Flashlight beams swept briefly across the snow-covered windows again. Too close now. Nova stood near the maintenance tunnel entrance, her body rigid, amber eyes fixed on Ethan instead of the men outside, waiting for his choice. That was the part twisting inside him. Not fear. Responsibility. The unconscious man near the fire needed immediate medical help, or he would die before sunrise. But if Ethan carried him out into the open, whoever was searching these woods would see them instantly. And if the sheriff could not be trusted, where exactly was he supposed to take him? Ethan pressed both hands against his face for a brief second, exhaustion cutting through him harder than the cold. He had spent years overseas making impossible calls with lives hanging on seconds. Leave one squad exposed to save another. Evacuate civilians or hold position. Every choice carried a cost. He hated that feeling, hated how quickly it returned. Nova approached him slowly now, careful, almost uncertain. Then she did something she had not done once since he found her on the highway. She rested her head gently against his arm. Ethan froze. Her fur was still damp from snow and trembling faintly beneath his sleeve. Trust. Small. Fragile. Given anyway. You picked the wrong Marine tonight, he whispered hoarsely. A loud crunch echoed outside. Footsteps. Ethan immediately killed the firelight with an old wool blanket, plunging the station into darkness except for pale moonlight leaking through broken boards. The footsteps stopped directly outside the front door. Silence followed. Heavy silence. The kind that pressed against your ribs. Then came a knock. Calm. Deliberate. Hello, a man called from outside. Older voice. Controlled. Sheriff Department. We are looking for an injured hiker and a missing dog. Nova backed away instantly at the sound of the voice. Not barking. Shaking. Ethan noticed it immediately. Her breathing turned fast and shallow as she lowered herself toward the floor beside the tunnel hatch. Fear again, but different this time. Personal. Ethan said nothing. Another knock came. Sir, if somebody is inside, conditions are getting dangerous up here. We can help. Ethan glanced toward the unconscious man. His breathing had become rougher now, almost rattling. Time was collapsing around him from both sides. Trust the sheriff and risk handing Nova over to whoever was hunting her. Refuse help and risk letting an innocent man die on the floor beside him. The voice outside softened slightly. We know she is in there. Nova's ears flattened completely. Ethan's stomach tightened. She. Not the dog. Not an animal. Like the sheriff already knew exactly who she was. The floorboards creaked beneath Ethan's boots as he stepped carefully toward the boarded window. Through a narrow crack, he finally saw the man outside clearly. Mid-60s. Heavy winter coat. Sheriff badge. Glinting beneath snowflakes. White mustache. Calm face. But something felt wrong immediately. The sheriff was standing alone in the storm with no urgency at all. No medical bag. No rescue equipment. No concern for the freezing temperatures. Just waiting. Behind him, near the truck, Ethan spotted the same white triangle symbol painted on the driver's side door. His pulse dropped cold. The same symbol from the pickup near the ridge. Nova released a low sound deep in her throat the second Ethan stepped back from the window. He looked toward her. You knew him. The dog slowly lowered her eyes. Then suddenly the unconscious man beside the fireplace began coughing violently, loud enough to echo through the station. Ethan cursed under his breath and rushed toward him, but outside the sheriff heard it too. Sir, the man called sharply now. Open the door. Somebody in there needs medical attention. Ethan checked the older man quickly. His skin had turned dangerously pale again despite the warmth earlier. He would not survive much longer underground in freezing conditions. Ethan looked toward the maintenance tunnel, then toward the front door, then back toward Nova. She stared at him silently while snow tapped against the windows like impatient fingers. Another cough tore through the room. The sheriff stepped closer outside. You have 1 minute before I come in myself. And for the first time since Ethan found the dog on that highway, Nova let out a sound that barely resembled a growl at all. It sounded like grief. Ethan stared at Nova while the sound escaped her throat again, low and broken, nothing like anger. It sounded like recognition twisted into fear. Outside, the sheriff shifted his weight in the snow. Last chance, he called through the door, voice still calm enough to make Ethan trust him even less. The older man near the fireplace suddenly convulsed with another violent cough. Blood spotted the edge of his beard this time. Small, but enough. Ethan knew that look. The man's body was shutting down inch by inch. He had minutes before cold and exhaustion finished what the mountain started. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. One choice could save a life. The other could destroy another. Then Nova did something unexpected. She walked toward the unconscious man slowly and pressed her nose gently against his hand. The older man stirred faintly at her touch. His lips moved. Ethan leaned closer to hear him. "Mara," he whispered weakly. "Find Mara." Ethan frowned immediately. Not Nova. Mara. Another name. Before he could ask anything else, the man slipped unconscious again. Outside, boots crunched closer across the porch. Ethan made the decision fast. He grabbed the old ranger station table and shoved it hard against the front door just as the handle rattled sharply from outside. "Sir," the sheriff called, "patient's gone now. You are making a mistake." Ethan ignored him. He crouched beside Nova instead and unclipped the torn leather collar carefully from around her neck. The dog flinched hard the second it loosened, then froze when she realized he was not hurting her. Up close, the collar looked even stranger beneath the flashlight beam. 2 layers of leather sewn together by hand. Uneven stitching. Hidden pockets built into the lining. Ethan slid his knife carefully beneath the inner seam. Nova watched every movement intensely, breathing shallow and fast. "Easy," he whispered. "I just need answers." The blade split the stitching open slowly. Something metallic slipped free and landed softly against the wooden floorboards. A key, smaller than the motel key found earlier. Brass. Old-fashioned. Attached to it was a faded hospital bracelet folded tightly around the ring. Ethan unfolded it carefully. Female. Age 7. St. Mercy Children's Hospital. Name, Mara Bennett. The little girl from the video. Ethan's chest tightened. Nova was never just a stray protecting a wounded man in the woods. She belonged to that child somehow. Another hard knock shook the front door. "Open up," one of the men outside barked. Nova immediately backed toward the tunnel hatch again, ears flattened. Ethan noticed something else then. The inside of the collar contained faint dark stains beneath the leather. Not dirt. Ink. He held the flashlight closer. Numbers. Coordinates. Written carefully by hand across the inside lining before being hidden. Beneath the stitching. Latitude and longitude. Ethan copied them quickly onto the back of the photograph while the wind screamed through cracks in the walls. Then the older man's eyes opened suddenly. Wide this time. Clearer. Terrified. His hand clamped around Ethan's wrist with surprising strength. "They use the dogs," he rasped painfully. "Transport routes, children, money. Nobody checks the dogs." Ethan stared at him silently. The old man swallowed hard, fighting for breath. Mara saw something she was not supposed to see. Nova moved closer immediately when the man spoke the little girl's name. Her tail remained low, but her trembling slowed slightly, like hearing the child mattered more than her own fear. Ethan leaned closer. "Where is she?" The older man's eyes watered instantly. "I do not know." Outside, an engine roared to life again. More headlights flooded through the cracks in the station walls now. Not one truck. 3. Ethan's pulse tightened. The sheriff had not come alone after all. "Please," the old man whispered weakly. "If they find the girl before Friday." His voice cracked apart into another cough. Ethan gripped his shoulder carefully. Before Friday what? But the answer never came. A sudden crash exploded through the front window as icy wind burst into the station, showering the floor with shattered glass and snow. Nova lunged instantly between Ethan and the opening, teeth bared now for the first time since he met her. Not wild. Protective. And standing beyond the broken window in the storm, flashlight pointed directly into the room. The sheriff finally stopped pretending to sound kind. "You should have snow," and freezing wind tore through the shattered window while the sheriff stood outside with ice collecting along the brim of his hat. Behind him, headlights burned through the storm like pale ghosts between the trees. Nova did not retreat this time. Every muscle in her body locked forward protectively as she stood between Ethan and the broken opening, chest rising hard, amber eyes fixed on the man outside. Ethan had seen military dogs stand like that before. Not when they were afraid. When they were prepared to die protecting someone. "Move away from the dog," the sheriff said calmly. "You have no idea what you are involved in." Ethan stepped closer to Nova instead. "Funny," he answered coldly. "I was about to say the same thing." The sheriff's expression shifted slightly then. Not anger. Disappointment. Like a teacher watching a student fail an easy test. The man behind you stole evidence from an active federal investigation, he said. That animal was trained to carry information between transport points. We have been tracking her for months. The older man on the floor suddenly forced himself upright with a painful gasp. Liar, he rasped weakly. You sold them. The sheriff's eyes hardened instantly. Ethan looked between them carefully now. Pieces were beginning to move together in ugly ways. The hidden coordinates. The warning. The trucks. The terrified little girl. The dogs transporting something nobody checked. But one thing still did not fit. Why would a child trust Nova enough to hide evidence inside her collar? The sheriff stepped closer to the broken window, snow swirling around him. Ask him who Mara Bennett really is. Ethan turned sharply toward the older man near the fireplace. The man's breathing became uneven again. Nova moved immediately to his side, pressing close against him protectively. Ethan frowned. Who is she? The older man closed his eyes briefly, like the answer itself hurt. My granddaughter, he whispered. Ethan froze. The sheriff smiled faintly outside. Now ask him why they were running. Silence swallowed the station except for the wind. The old man's eyes filled slowly with tears reflecting the weak firelight beneath the blanket. Because she found the ledger. Ethan's pulse slowed. What ledger? The sheriff answered before the old man could speak. Every route. Every payment. Every official involved. He tilted his head slightly. Including me. Ethan stared at him. The honesty landed harder than denial would have. Outside, one of the men near the trucks shifted nervously in the snow, but the sheriff never looked away from Ethan. You see, Marine, he said quietly. The problem with children is they notice things adults overlook. Nova suddenly whimpered softly beside the old man. He reached trembling fingers into the inside lining of his coat and pulled out a folded photograph Ethan had not seen before. He handed it over shakily. Ethan unfolded it beneath the flashlight beam. His stomach dropped instantly. The photograph showed a younger version of the sheriff standing beside Mara outside a church picnic. Smiling, one arm around her shoulders. Family. He was her godfather. The old man whispered brokenly. Ethan looked back toward the sheriff through the shattered window. The man did not deny it. Snow clung to his gray mustache, while grief flickered briefly beneath the coldness in his eyes. Real grief. I tried to protect her, the sheriff said softly. At first, Nova released another low cry at the sound of his voice. Ethan finally understood. The dog was not only afraid of the sheriff. She remembered him, trusted him once. The sheriff glanced down at Nova with something almost human in his expression now. Regret. She used to sleep in my office every Friday after school, he murmured. Mara would read books beside the heater while that dog waited by the door. Ethan's chest tightened painfully. Then what happened? The sheriff looked away toward the storm for the first time. People get greedy. The old man shook violently beside the fire. You delivered children to them. The sheriff closed his eyes briefly. I delivered paperwork. Routes. Schedules. The kind of evil men convince themselves is not the same thing. His voice cracked slightly beneath the wind. Then Mara saw one of the transfers. Ethan felt the room tilt beneath him. The little girl had never just witnessed corruption. She had uncovered an entire network hidden behind law enforcement and transport routes. Nova had not been carrying random information in her collar. She had been carrying proof. The sheriff looked back at Ethan again, older suddenly. Tired. If those men outside find Mara before sunrise, she disappears forever. Ethan tightened his grip on the photograph. Where is she? The sheriff's eyes lowered slowly toward the brass key in Ethan's hand. Room 214. Then from somewhere deep beneath the station, floorboards came a sudden sound. Small. Weak. A child coughing. Ethan turned toward the sound instantly. Another weak cough echoed beneath the floorboards. Small. Fragile. Human. Every man outside heard it too. The sheriff's face drained of color beneath the falling snow. No, he whispered under his breath. One of the men near the trucks started moving toward the station immediately, but the sheriff raised his arm sharply without looking away from Ethan. Nobody enters, he barked. The command carried real fear this time. Ethan dropped beside the maintenance hatch while Nova rushed ahead of him, claws scraping across the old wood floor. The dog whined desperately now, circling the opening like she had been waiting for this moment all night. Ethan pulled the hatch open fully and aimed his flashlight downward. The narrow tunnel stretched into darkness beneath the station, lined with old pipes and exposed earth. Then he saw them. Tiny footprints in the mud. Barefoot. Fresh. Mara. The old man breathed weakly near the fireplace, tears streaking through the dirt on his face. Ethan descended first, boots splashing through freezing water pooled along the tunnel floor. The air beneath the station smelled damp and stale, carrying the faint scent of mildew and rusted metal. Nova squeezed past him halfway down the tunnel and disappeared into the dark ahead. Then came another sound, a child crying softly. Ethan's chest tightened hard enough to hurt. "It is okay," he called carefully. "You are safe." No answer, just silence. Then the flashlight beam caught movement in the far corner of the underground chamber. A little girl curled beneath an old wool blanket beside stacked supply crates, knees pulled tightly against her chest. Purple winter coat, blonde hair tangled and dirty from days underground. She looked smaller than Ethan imagined from the video. Much smaller. Nova reached her first. The second the dog approached, the little girl broke completely. "Nova," she sobbed softly, throwing both arms around the shepherd's neck. The dog pressed against her carefully, trembling as hard as the child was. Ethan stopped walking. Something inside him shifted painfully at the sight. Marines learned to survive by building walls around grief, around guilt, around every face they could not save in time. But there was no wall left in that underground room. Just a terrified little girl clinging to the only creature who never abandoned her. Mara finally looked up at Ethan with wide, exhausted eyes. "Did he send you?" she whispered. Ethan knelt slowly a few feet away. No, his voice softened in a way he barely recognized himself. "Nova found me." The child looked down at the dog again, tears still falling silently into her fur. "I told her to run if something happened." Ethan swallowed hard. "Something already happened, kiddo." Above them, muffled voices echoed faintly through the floorboards. Time was collapsing fast again. Mara seemed to hear them too, because fear immediately returned to her face. She shrank backward against the wall. "Please do not let the sheriff take me." Ethan hesitated for half a second before answering. "He is the reason nobody else came down here." Mara looked confused. "Why?" Ethan thought about the man standing outside in the storm. The regret in his eyes. The shame. The terrible truth that some people become monsters slowly, one compromise at a time. "Because I think he is trying to fix something he broke," Ethan said quietly. Nova suddenly stepped away from Mara and approached Ethan instead. Slowly, carefully. The shepherd pressed her head beneath his hand for the first time since the night began. Ethan froze. Her amber eyes lifted toward him with something he had not seen before. Not fear. Trust. Real trust. The kind earned inch by inch. His throat tightened unexpectedly. "You kept her alive down here," he whispered. The dog's ears twitched softly at the sound of his voice. Mara wiped her eyes with shaking hands. "Nova stayed with me every night," she said quietly. "When the trucks came near the station, she would hide me and sleep by the tunnel entrance." Ethan looked at the scars along the dog's neck again. The torn collar. The exhaustion in her body. Suddenly the truth hit him harder than any gunfire ever had. She had not been running for herself all this time. Every mile through snow and darkness. Every risk. Every wound. She had been protecting a child. Above them, a loud crash shook the station floor overhead. Voices shouted sharply through the storm. The men outside were no longer waiting. Mara flinched violently at the sound and buried her face into Nova's fur again. Ethan looked upward toward the ceiling while cold water dripped steadily from the pipes beside him. Then he made the kind of decision that changes a man forever. He removed his old Marine Corps jacket slowly and wrapped it around Mara's shoulders. "Listen to me," he said softly. "I am getting both of you out of here." And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole realized he was no longer trying to survive the night for himself. Ethan moved fast after that. The old maintenance tunnel curved beneath the mountain toward an emergency drainage exit nearly 200 yards from the ranger station. Rusted pipes lined the ceiling overhead, while freezing water soaked through Ethan's boots with every step. Mara stayed close beside Nova, one small hand buried deep in the dog's fur, as if letting go would make the darkness swallow her whole again. Behind them, muffled shouting echoed through the floorboards above. The men were inside the station now, searching. Ethan carried the injured grandfather across his shoulders despite the fire burning through his muscles. The older man drifted in and out of consciousness, each breath sounding thinner than the last. "Stay with me," Ethan muttered through clenched teeth. "Just a little farther." Nova suddenly stopped walking. Her ears lifted sharply toward the tunnel behind them. Then she turned and growled low into the darkness. Ethan froze instantly. Flashlight beams flickered faintly somewhere far back near the station entrance. They had found the tunnel. Mara's breathing quickened beside him. "They are coming," she whispered. Ethan looked ahead toward the narrow drainage exit barely visible in the distance beneath weak moonlight filtering through iron grates. 50 yards maybe. 60. But the old man was fading fast, and Mara could barely keep moving after days underground. Ethan's mind raced through impossible options again. Then the grandfather grabbed his sleeve weakly. "Leave me," he whispered painfully. Ethan ignored him and kept moving. "Marine," the old man coughed. "Listen to me." Ethan stopped for half a second. The older man's eyes were glassy now beneath the flickering flashlight beam. "You already saved the only life that matters." Mara immediately shook her head hard. "No," she cried softly. "Grandpa, please." Nova pressed close against the child protectively while Ethan stared at the old man in silence. He had seen this before too. Men who understood exactly how much time they had left. The grandfather reached weakly into his coat and pulled out a folded envelope spotted with melted snow and dirt. "If she survives," he whispered to Ethan, "give her this when she is older." Ethan took the envelope carefully without opening it. A moment later, Nova suddenly barked once toward the tunnel behind them. Sharp. Urgent. Flashlights bounced wildly against the walls now. Much closer. Ethan made the call instantly. He shifted the older man more securely over his shoulders and forced himself forward again. The drainage exit groaned loudly when Ethan shoved against it with his shoulder. Ice cracked apart outside as freezing night air rushed into the tunnel. Pine trees swayed violently beneath the storm beyond the grate. Freedom, but also exposure. Ethan climbed out first, pulling Mara carefully behind him while Nova leaped silently into the snow beside them. The mountain wind hit hard enough to steal breath from his lungs. Dawn was beginning to bleed faint gray light across the horizon now. Not sunrise yet, but close. Ethan scanned the forest quickly and spotted an old fire lookout cabin nearly a quarter-mile downhill through the trees. "There," he whispered. Mara stumbled from exhaustion after only a few steps. Ethan reached for her automatically, but Nova moved first. The shepherd lowered herself beside the child, allowing Mara to wrap both arms around her neck for support. Together they moved through the snow as one trembling shape beneath the dark pines. Ethan felt something break quietly inside his chest at the sight. Loyalty that pure should not exist in a world this cruel. Halfway down the slope, the grandfather suddenly coughed hard against Ethan's shoulder. Then he whispered something so faint Ethan almost missed it. "The coordinates." Ethan looked down sharply. "What about them?" The old man swallowed painfully. "Not a place." His breathing shuddered unevenly. "A date." Ethan stopped walking. Cold moved through him harder than the storm. The coordinates hidden in Nova's collar were never directions. They were numbers arranged to look like coordinates. A coded date. Friday. Ethan's pulse quickened instantly. What happens Friday? But the old man's eyes had already closed again. Ahead of them, the old lookout cabin emerged through the trees beneath weak dawn light. Smoke drifted faintly from the chimney. Ethan slowed immediately. Smoke meant someone was already inside. Ethan stopped cold beneath the trees while smoke drifted slowly from the chimney of the lookout cabin ahead. Dawn spread pale silver across the mountains now, turning the storm softer but no less dangerous. Nova moved protectively in front of Mara again, ears raised toward the cabin. Watching, listening. The little girl clutched Ethan's oversized marine jacket tightly around herself, while her grandfather's breathing weakened against Ethan's shoulder with every step. Then the cabin door creaked open. An old woman stepped onto the porch holding a lantern. Mid-70s perhaps. Gray braid over one shoulder. Thick wool coat. She looked at Ethan once. Then at Mara. And finally at Nova. Her eyes filled immediately. "Lord help me," she whispered. "You found them." Ethan did not lower his guard. "Who are you?" The woman slowly raised both hands away from the lantern. "Name is Evelyn Carter," she said gently. "I ran search and rescue in these mountains 30 years. Her eyes stayed fixed on Nova now. "That dog came to my cabin 3 nights ago." Ethan frowned. "What?" Evelyn nodded slowly. She was bleeding, half frozen, kept barking at the woods like she wanted me to follow her somewhere. She looked toward Mara again, voice breaking softly. But the storm got too bad. Nova walked toward the old woman carefully, then stopped inches from her boots. Evelyn crouched slowly despite the cold and touched the shepherd gently behind the ears. Nova closed her eyes for half a second. Peace. Tiny. Fragile. But real. Ethan carried Mara's grandfather inside while Evelyn locked the cabin door behind them. Warmth wrapped around the room immediately. Firelight flickered against old wooden walls lined with faded photographs of mountain rescues, missing hikers, snowstorms long forgotten by everyone except the people who survived them. Mara sat quietly beside the fireplace with Nova pressed against her side, while Evelyn prepared blankets and hot tea with trembling hands. The old man regained consciousness briefly near sunrise. Weak sunlight spilled through frosted windows while snow drifted softly outside the cabin now, gentle at last after a night that felt endless. Mara held her grandfather's hand tightly. I am sorry, she whispered through tears. This is my fault. The old man lifted shaking fingers slowly to her cheek. No, sweetheart, he murmured. The fault belongs to grown men who forgot children matter more than money. Nova rested her head across the blanket beside him. The old man smiled faintly at the dog. Good girl, he whispered. You kept your promise. Ethan stood silently near the window watching dawn climb across the mountains while something heavy settled deep inside him. He had spent years believing war only existed overseas. But evil did not always wear uniforms or carry rifles. Sometimes it wore sheriff badges. Sometimes it smiled at church picnics beside children. A distant sound interrupted the quiet then. Helicopters. Far away at first, then growing louder over the mountains. Evelyn moved quickly to the radio near the shelf and turned the volume higher. Static crackled through the cabin before a dispatcher's voice finally broke through. Federal authorities confirmed multiple arrests overnight connected to interstate trafficking investigations across Montana and Idaho. Mara buried her face into Nova's fur instantly. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. The nightmare was ending. At least part of it. Then Evelyn looked toward him sharply from the radio. They are saying Sheriff Donnelly is missing. Silence filled the cabin immediately. Ethan turned slowly toward the window again. Snow drifted peacefully through pale morning light outside. No trucks, no voices, no footprints left on the road below anymore. Just empty white mountains stretching forever. The old man's breathing suddenly slowed beside the fire. Mara looked up instantly. Grandpa, he smiled weakly at her one final time. Then his eyes shifted toward Ethan. Take her somewhere kind, he whispered. Ethan nodded once. The old man's hand slipped gently from Mara's fingers after that. Quietly, like exhaustion finally won. Mara cried softly into Nova's neck while the shepherd stayed perfectly still beside her, absorbing every trembling breath the child could not hold together alone. Ethan stepped outside the cabin a little while later because grief felt too sacred to interrupt. The storm had finally passed. Pine trees glittered beneath fresh snow while weak sunlight touched the mountain's gold. For the first time in years, the world looked still. Nova emerged from the cabin quietly and sat beside him on the porch. Ethan looked down at her torn collar resting in his hands. The hidden stitching, the scars, the impossible loyalty stitched through every mile she traveled to protect one frightened little girl. You carried all of this alone, he whispered softly. Nova leaned against his leg without looking up. Ethan stared toward the endless forest below them while helicopters echoed faintly somewhere beyond the mountains. Authorities would come soon. Questions, investigations, courts, news cameras. But none of that would ever explain the one thing he could not stop thinking about. Out of all the roads in Montana, all the miles of storm and darkness, why had Nova stepped in front of his truck that night? Ethan looked down at the dog beside him. Her amber eyes lifted toward the horizon where snow drifted through morning light like ash from some old forgotten fire. Then, very softly, Nova rested her head against his knee as if she already knew the answer. In one of the most emotional animal stories you will ever hear, a wounded German shepherd steps out of a deadly Montana snowstorm and leads a former U.S. Marine toward a mystery buried beneath. The mountains, what begins as a rescue soon uncovers hidden secrets, a missing little girl, and a network of betrayal hiding behind trusted faces. As the Marine fights freezing temperatures, fear, and impossible choices, the loyal dog proves that love and courage can survive even the darkest cruelty. These unforgettable animal stories explore sacrifice, redemption, loyalty, and the silent bond between a child and the dog who refused to abandon her. Through snow-covered forests, hidden tunnels, and heartbreaking truths, the former Marine and the abused shepherd discover that some souls are sent into our lives for a reason. Filled with cinematic emotion, suspense, faith, and powerful storytelling, these animal stories reveal how one loyal dog carried hope through pain and how one broken soldier found purpose again through protecting a frightened child. If you love emotional rescue dramas, heartfelt survival journeys, and deeply moving animal stories about trust, healing, and second chances, this story will stay with you long after the final scene fades. Experience one of the most unforgettable animal stories about loyalty, courage, and the quiet miracles that sometimes arrive on four paws. Ultra-realistic portrait of a 38-year-old white U.S. Marine veteran with rugged masculine features, short dark brown hair, light stubble, tired hazel eyes, wearing a weathered olive military jacket in snowy Montana wilderness. Front-facing view, cinematic lighting, realistic skin texture, no cartoon, no CGI. No illustration. Ultra-realistic full-body female German Shepherd age 5, with sable black and tan coat, amber eyes, visible scars on neck and ribs, standing alert in snowy Montana. Forest, cinematic natural lighting, realistic fur texture, emotionally expressive posture, full body reference, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. One ultra-realistic cinematic night scene on a snow-covered Montana highway during a violent winter storm. A wounded female German Shepherd with sable black and tan fur stands motionless directly in front of bright truck headlights. Torn leather collar hanging from her neck with mysterious stitched markings partially visible, amber. Eyes reflecting fear and urgency, snow blowing across the road. Emotional tension, realistic wet fur texture, dramatic cinematic lighting, realistic atmosphere, close-up perspective with deep emotional focus. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Highly realistic movie still style. Mysterious and suspenseful emotional tone. 2 ultra-realistic cinematic interior of a lonely Montana mountain cabin at dawn. Rugged white former U.S. Marine in his late 30s sitting silently beside a frosted window wearing a weathered olive military jacket and dark thermal shirt. Tired hazel eyes staring at untouched coffee mug while snow falls outside. Old military dog tags resting on wooden table beside his rough hands. Emotional isolation and grief visible in facial expression. Warm dim lighting mixed with cold blue winter light. Realistic skin texture. Close cinematic framing. Emotional realism. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Realistic dramatic photography. Style. 1, 2, 3 ultra-realistic cinematic underground tunnel scene with frightened little blonde girl wrapped in oversized winter coat, sitting closely beside exhausted female German Shepherd. The dog protectively curled around the child while muddy paw prints and a pink glove rest nearby on damp concrete floor. Flickering flashlight illuminating rusted pipes overhead. Emotional survival atmosphere. Realistic fur texture. Child clinging tightly to the dog with tearful eyes. Cinematic close shot. With strong emotional tension. Dark realistic environment. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Emotionally powerful movie still composition. 1, 2, 4 ultra-realistic cinematic snowstorm rescue scene outside abandoned ranger station in Montana wilderness. Rugged former Marine kneeling beside injured female German Shepherd while holding flashlight towards strange symbols hidden inside torn collar. Distant flashlight, beams moving through dark pine forest behind them, creating fear and suspense. Dog growling protectively with tense posture. Snow and ice covering both characters. Dramatic emotional expressions. Cinematic close-up angle. Realistic winter atmosphere. Realistic skin and fur detail. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Highly emotional thriller movie, still aesthetic. 1, 2, 5 ultra-realistic cinematic abandoned ranger station interior at night. Former Marine lifting broken floorboards with flashlight, while anxious female German shepherd watches from dark corner with alert amber eyes. Hidden broken cell phone and tiny pink winter glove wrapped in plastic revealed beneath dusty wooden floor, cold blue moonlight entering through cracked walls, emotional suspense. And mystery atmosphere, realistic textures of wood dust snow and fur, cinematic mid-shot composition, realistic dramatic storytelling aesthetic, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration, emotionally intense movie still realism. 6 ultra-realistic cinematic underground tunnel escape scene. Frightened little girl holding tightly onto exhausted female German shepherd, while rugged former Marine crouches nearby, examining cracked cell phone, displaying mysterious, unfinished video message. Freezing water covering tunnel floor and rusted pipes dripping overhead. Emotional fear and trust visible on every face. Flashlight glow creating dramatic shadows across wet concrete walls. Cinematic close emotional framing. Realistic fur and skin texture. Intense suspenseful atmosphere. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Realistic emotional thriller movie style. 7 ultra-realistic cinematic confrontation scene during heavy snowstorm outside shattered ranger station window. Older white sheriff standing outside aiming flashlight into dark cabin, while female German shepherd stands protectively between him and rugged former Marine inside. Emotional tension and betrayal visible on faces. Broken glass covered with snow and ice. Dramatic winter lighting illuminating swirling snowflakes. Cinematic close perspective focused on fear and conflict without violence. Realistic movie atmosphere. Realistic textures and expressions. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Emotionally charged cinematic realism. 8 ultra-realistic cinematic firelit ranger station interior. Rugged former Marine carefully cutting open hidden stitching inside worn leather dog collar while exhausted female German shepherd watches nervously beside dying fireplace. Brass key and handwritten coded numbers revealed inside collar. Wounded elderly man blurred in background wrapped in blankets. Emotional suspense and heartbreaking atmosphere. Realistic hands leather fur and firelight textures. Cinematic close-up composition focused on mystery and emotion. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Dramatic realistic movie still style. 9 ultra-realistic cinematic underground. Escape tunnel flooded with freezing water. Former Marine carrying injured elderly man across shoulders while frightened little girl clings to female German shepherd beside him. Distant flashlight beams appearing through dark tunnel behind them creating urgency and fear. Realistic wet clothing and soaked fur textures. Emotional desperation mixed with determination. Dramatic flashlight shadows reflecting on tunnel walls. Cinematic action realism with emotional storytelling focus. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Highly detailed realistic thriller movie scene. 10 ultra-realistic cinematic warm mountain lookout cabin interior during snowy dawn. Frightened little blonde girl sitting beside glowing fireplace wrapped in oversized military jacket, while female German shepherd rests head gently on her lap. Elderly woman standing nearby emotionally watching them with tears in her eyes. Helicopter lights faintly visible through frosted cabin window outside. Emotional. Safety and exhaustion atmosphere. Realistic firelight illuminating detailed fur and skin textures. Cinematic emotional framing. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Deeply moving realistic film still composition. 11 ultra-realistic cinematic sunrise scene outside remote mountain cabin after snowstorm. Rugged former Marine standing alone holding torn leather dog collar in rough hands, while female German shepherd sits quietly beside him looking toward distant snowy mountains. Faint helicopter silhouettes visible far away in pale morning sky. Emotional exhaustion and quiet reflection visible in posture and expression. Realistic winter lighting and atmospheric fog. Cinematic wide. Close shot blend. Highly detailed realistic textures. No cartoon, no CGI, no illustration. Emotional cinematic realism inspired by dramatic American films. 1. 2. 12 ultra-realistic cinematic emotional ending scene on wooden cabin porch during peaceful snowy sunrise. Female German shepherd gently resting her head against former Marine's knee while he sits silently beside her looking toward endless pine forests. Frightened little girl safely watching from warm, glowing cabin window. Behind them, soft snow falling through golden morning light, creating quiet spiritual atmosphere, deep emotional bond, and healing visible in body language and expressions, realistic fur and skin textures, cinematic close emotional composition, no cartoon, no CGI, no illustration, powerful heartfelt realistic movie still ending. 1, 2.